Hello, everybody. This is Andrew Colsky from Stop My OCD, and I'm really excited for this episode today because we've got Julie Derrick coming all the way from the UK to talk to us about kids and OCD. And she's a big advocate. She's got a lot of great information, and I can't wait to have her share it. So, Julie, could you introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Julie, mum to two daughters. I've got experience of parenting a teenager with OCD, and it inspired me then to publish two children's books to try and raise awareness so that other parents are aware of early signs of OCD in the hope it deters them from having to go through what we went through as a family.
Great, great. Thanks. I've had the opportunity to read your books, and we'll talk about those in a little bit. But before we do that, tell us, how did you first ever become aware of OCD, and tell us what happened?
Right, well, basically, it sneaked in before I'd really realised. I picked up on a few early signs. It was just little things like her putting her hood up to go to bed in a hoodie. But she convinced me, or rather now I know it was OCD was convincing us because it's separate to her, was telling us that that's what all her teenage friends did. And of course, when they came round for a sleepover, they did all sleep in their hoods. So I thought, okay, maybe this is just a phase. But of course, I now know that even at that early stage, OCD was recruiting the friends as well to do the compulsions my daughter was doing. So then it sort of sneaked in through the back door and tricked us. I now know I suffer from a lot of OCD traits myself. So you would think that I would have picked up on early signs, but sadly I didn't. They did sneak in very, very quickly and very severely, because by the time she got diagnosed, she was too severely ill to go into the clinic, and we had to have the intense therapy team round to the house to actually treat her from the home, because by that stage she was confined to a chair. The contamination OCD was so bad.
Wow. And how old was she at this point?
She was 14 when she was officially diagnosed.
And roughly how old was she when you started to notice anything kind of OCD like?
As I say, it was just sort of the hoodie. And I noticed when she was going to camps and things, she was taking cleaning products with her. But again, she was just telling us that a friend was a bit of a clean freak, which again, that was sort of OCD recruiting the friend into cleaning. And I mean, I look back and I think, were there any other signs? But they were just little things, but nothing major really, until it got to the stage that our whole house had become contaminated. And she was just fearful to go in any room. And then, of course, he recruited us. And we then were banned from, and we had to avoid certain rooms and furniture and places. And it just got completely out of control, really, very, very quickly, frighteningly quickly.
Yeah. So, you're talking about, the need for someone with OCD to have their parents or family accommodate them. And, anyone in the OCD field sees this all the time. And so tell me, as a parent, when you were first being sort of recruited to accommodate some of her cleaning habits and things, what did you feel? Did you feel that you had to do it, or what were your thoughts?
I felt I had to do it because I think, particularly as a Welsh mum, we're incredibly nurturing. I was one of these people who wanted to be the perfect mum. Didn't think I'd ever have children. I had them later in life. So, of course, they came along. They were my world. And, of course, when she was just hysterical, and as you know, an OCD meltdown is quite frightening. It's almost like they've got your child hostage. And you're just going to do anything, aren't you, to just try and calm the anxiety? Because added to that, I also had a sibling who was 16 months younger, who was absolutely terrified as well, because she was terrified that she was getting recruited into this monster. And as I say, in the end, I was doing all manner of compulsion. I mean, look back now and they seem completely crazy. But at the time, you would just did anything to calm this hysterical child who really thought something dreadful was going to happen if you didn't do it.
Yeah, and that's the common story, is that, if you don't follow what they want you to do, then it makes them very distressed and very upset. And that's the last thing a parent wants to do, or any loved one wants to do, is to make their other loved one feel distressed or uncomfortable or anything. And it creates this terrible cycle, because as we know now, once we have a diagnosis and once we start to treat, that accommodation only makes things worse. It doesn't help make things better. But you don't know until you know
No,
what the diagnosis is, and how to address it. You just don't know what to do.
no.
So you finally get to a point where there's a diagnosis, and what happens from there?
She was assigned a psychiatrist and a mental health nurse. And they then worked with us. They were coming, I think at the beginning, twice a week, but then it became just once a week. And then we just came up with a plan. I can remember going to a coffee shop with her and we just listed every single item that needed to be addressed. And I can remember at the time, it was a huge sheet of card because my daughter's artistic, she loves art. So we bought some colour pens and this lovely colour card, but I've kept it actually. And we filled 2 complete sides. And that was just with blocks of rooms to be addressed. That wasn't every item within the room. And then gradually then the CAMS, we're fortunate here in the UK, we've got CAMS, which is a free service for children's mental health. Again, it's got its pluses and negatives. It gets a lot of bad press, but from my own experience, they were wonderful with us. And they came up with a plan. So then they would maybe say, well, we want you to do this within a week or within a month, whatever the plan was. But of course, then you find yourself as a parent almost thrust into the role of a therapist without any qualifications, because we're basically the ones that have got to get the therapy done. I mean, we were incredibly grateful for the support and to know how to address it. But when you've got a child who's incredibly stubborn, I mean, the last person they want to do therapy for is their mum or dad, isn't it? So that was extremely challenging. I mean, her school attendance, she was very, very intelligent, which I'm now told is quite common with OCD children and very creative. Her school attendance plummeted. And I had to then support her because obviously books were becoming contaminated. So they had to be left in school. So I just had to find a way out of the box, really, to try and help her with her education at home. Obviously, some of the house was contaminated. So I would just go with her in the car. We're lucky to be living close to a coast. So we used to sit in the car and I'd look at photographs off the phone, or I would manually type them up on my computer. And that's basically how we got her to not fall behind with school. And she ended up, I mean, her attendance really low. She's very ambitious. And I honestly thought that her life was just going to slip away. I couldn't see a way out of it. She was so severe. They said she was one of the worst cases they'd ever seen. But anyway, through thinking out the box and hard work and perseverance and a lot of tears, she eventually left with top grades. And I always say to people, I don't say to brag or to boast. I just say to offer hope, because there is a way, but you just have to think of a different way to help them and support them. And she's now studying in London in a top university for the career of her dreams. So, I mean, I always say if I had to box anything for parents, it's hope. Because we were in a really, really dark place and we are in a much better place now. So there is always hope, however ill your child might seem.
Right. So today, what is her experience with OCD?
Her experience with OCD is when she was at 18 with CAMS, you actually get then referred to adult mental health, and it becomes a choice then whether you enroll with them or not. She chose not to. And their words when she was discharged was she was 80% cured. So well, even the 80%, we were living a more normal life. But then within about a 12 months, then sure, I'm completely cured. And the one issue she had seemed to have been cured. But as we know, OCD creeps back in. And then we'll have long periods of not having anything. And then like the other week, he sneaked back in, anxiety was high, and he sneaked back in. But what we now know is how to manage it. And obviously, I think from my experience of parenting, you've got to give into something, but I try and give into a little thing to avoid 5 things creeping in. So I'll just say, look, this is a one-off deal. We'll come up with a plan and this is only for today. And to be fair to her, that's how it's, but they're very few and far between now. When they happen, they're still pretty scary because you think, oh, here we go again, because you just don't want to repeat of where you were before. But we now know how to manage them. And she's in university. And obviously she's doing a very stressful course. And as we know, anxiety peaks and then he tries to sneak back in. But she now will come on FaceTime, the wonder of FaceTime. She'll speak to me, she'll say, Mum, I'm anxious. What's the plan? So we'll come up with a plan and I say, look, I can't take you. I can't drive to London, nor would I, because it's an extremely busy town. So I say, we'll do the next best thing. So I've now booked her a monthly pass on a bus. I say, just get on there for a mystery trip because she loves to travel. Take your bag with you with your work and then just jump off at a coffee stop, wherever the destination takes you. And that's what she does. And then she comes back and she's calm again. He doesn't creep back in. So I've now learned how to manage the anxiety, even when she's not living at home, which has been a huge bonus.
Wow, that's great. That's great. So then when she was first starting treatment, did she just use therapy? Did she supplement it with medication? What did she go through?
This was another tricky one for me because they were not pressurizing, that's probably a bit unfair. They were recommending medication. Now, I'm a mum. I don't take pain relief for anything unless I'm nearly dying. I don't take anything. I brought my children up to be quite tough. They've never missed school. They've just got on with it. They don't feel pain. They've got a high threshold of pain like me. So this was a really, really tough one for me. And I resisted, but I could see that she was not going to yield on therapy. She was not going to do it. So unfortunately, yeah, I did have to relent and I did have to let her go on therapy. But I've got a hand on heart say she would not have recovered had she not got on it. I'm not saying it's for everybody. It's probably dependent on the severity. Sadly, hers had gone and missed for so long. I think she was too seriously ill to have tackled it on her own. So I just think everything in its place. And it's obviously a chat for you to have, isn't it, with a medical professional, and just go by their advice and just give it a go. I mean, I've often asked her, is she pleased she did? And she said yes, because she said it did manage to tone down the sound of the voice. So at the end of the day, it's her call, isn't it? Because I'm not living through that hell. So as long as it helped her, and it did the trick. So
fantastic, great, yeah, that's pretty much the story that I experience as well. And when I talk with my clients, I tell them that 40-50% of my clients typically do okay with therapy alone. But then there's the next step who really benefit from adding medication in. And I always make it clear to them that medication is not something that's going to cure OCD, and taking medication without therapy isn't usually very effective. But when you combine the two, in those cases where it's needed, you can really make a lot of progress.
Yes, definitely.
So you dealt with all the things that you're describing, and I'm sure it took up a tremendous amount of your time, but she's off in college now. She's doing well. You've got a plan on how to work with it, but you've become an advocate.
I have. I think I've become the LinkedIn voice and everywhere else that I hang out. Because funny enough, I was speaking to a parent the other day, and we were just saying parenting OCD is a very lonely place to be. You don't want to admit blame. You don't want to admit that you took your eye off the ball and you made your child so ill. You don't want people to judge you because it sounds crazy. I mean, the times the parents have said to me, obviously you haven't known because we've kept it private, oh, look at her diva there, sat in the back like Lady Mac. I think you've got no idea how traumatic that is for my child sitting there, because she's doing exposure therapy in a confined place, so she feels very threatened. But people are very quick to judge without sometimes thinking there could be a reason why a person, I think they just saw me as a mug. And we were just saying it's really sad because you've got other mental health issues out there, such as anxiety and depression, ADHD, autism. That's all out there, but OCD seems to still be very misunderstood and kept very private. And it's sad, really, because as we said, it is a life-restricting illness, and it doesn't just restrict the victim, does it? It restricts the whole family, because we were confined to the home in the end because this monster was telling us it was unsafe for anybody to come in the house. We were to avoid other places at all costs, and it's really quite serious when you're living with it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I see over your shoulder there is Hank, the big purple monster. Yep. And yes, we were comparing before we started recording that, I've got Ozzy D over here, and they could be cousins.
Yes, they could.
But the personification of sort of the OCD helps in treatment in some cases, because people can better picture what's going on and kind of label it. So yeah, you then ended up writing some books. Tell us about your books.
I did. The early hours of one morning, a story just came into my head from literally nowhere. And I thought, I'll type it on my phone. And I typed it up then onto a Word document and kept it on my computer for quite a few years. I thought, no, I've got no aspirations to publish a book, because I was a very, very quiet person. I mean, you see me sort of raising the voice for OCD, but prior to that, I was a very quiet, private person. And then during lockdown, my husband said to me, I think it's time for you to publish your book. So then during lockdown then, again, with no experience whatsoever of publishing a book, I wrote the story up onto a manuscript. I found an illustrator. I've never to this day spoken with the illustrator. It was all done via email. I gave him this idea in my head of what I thought Hank looked like. And I'm not particularly creative really in that way, but I just seem to know straight away what he would look like. So I got my husband to do a rough sketch because he's more creative than me. And then Glenn, my illustrator, then just brought him to life perfectly as I envisaged him. And then I found a publisher to do a joint publishing deal with. I got somebody to proofread it, and then we eventually got it all together, and I published it in November 2020. Started marketing it, got it in some online publications, and he's on Amazon as well as on my website. And then I did the sequel then, Trixie the Treat Monster, which saw the return of Hank to a new victim and a new theme of OCD. And as I say, I donate 50% of the profits then to CAMS, as I say, which is a free service that we have here in the UK, because it's a way of giving back really, for being so grateful for their help and getting our life back.
Wonderful. So you've got the books out there, and I'm sure other parents who are dealing with similar things appreciate the opportunity to have that resource. Do you do any other types of things? Like, do you consult with people? Do you have any kind of groups that you speak with? Tell us more. Tell us more about what you do.
Okay, I've got a free Facebook group, but I mean, Facebook these days is just a bit temperamental. It's just really difficult building up your following on there, but I have one on there, and I've got a Facebook page. Obviously, I'm on social media as well. But I'm trying to think now. Sorry, what was the question again?
Well, so I know that you do a lot.
The other things I do, yeah. I've got the ebook. I've actually created an ebook because what I realized, I wrote a book for younger children because that's just the idea that came in my head. But then I was aware then that my main experience was with teenagers. So I've created a digital handbook for parents, not instead of therapy, but I'm just conscious, particularly here in the UK, there's huge waiting lists at the moment, particularly since COVID. So I decided to create a resource that people can download just to help them with therapy, with what I learned in therapy while they wait for therapy, or if the children are resistant to therapy, because I've got some tips in there as well on how to overcome challenges, because teenagers aren't they? They don't always want to do therapy. And I'm trying to do it from a parent perspective, really, because like I said, you can have all the help, professional help you like, but when it's down to us as parents, you need to understand it, know how to tackle it without sort of feeding it. I do ad hoc workshops as well. And then last week I did my first one-to-one session with a client who was struggling. So I have started to introduce some one-to-one work as well to just try and give advice from a parent's perspective, really.
Right. Wow. Just out of curiosity, you're over in the UK, I'm in the US. Have you come across any parents in the US that are doing anything similar?
There's one, Natasha Daniels. She does, but she's a parent and a therapist, but she has OCD and her children have OCD. She's actually brilliant. And then there's Nathan, forget his surname. He's a really good one in the US as well, but he's a therapist. But not so many parents. Natasha's probably the closest because she's a parent and a therapist with OCD.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's a little niche area of a niche area, meaning kids and OCD. It requires its own unique twist because kids process things differently than adults. And, that's why I love your Hank monster there and how you put it together.
Yeah, thank you.
So I'm curious, you said you have two daughters, and we've talked about one daughter with OCD. How did your other daughter handle it?
She at one point was doing everything for her sister because she was the trusted one with Hank. She was the one that was told that was the safest. And I look back now and her life was pretty tough. She was 13 at the time and she was doing practically everything around the house. And it becomes all consuming OCD. And it's very easy to look back with hindsight, isn't it? But looking back, I mean, my daughter with OCD was getting all these wonderful rewards for doing all these because it was so difficult that they just said to introduce some form of sweetener. And I look back and I think, well, where was my youngest daughter's reward for all she was putting up with? But of course, this was like sort of all consuming, taking me over. And I try and look back now. I hope I did ask my other daughter how she was coping. But in those dark days, you can't even remember. And I think, and this is what I say to people now, and it's my biggest regret, is I say protect siblings, because it's tough for them too. I mean, she had this monster calling those shots. She couldn't have friends round to the house. She couldn't go into certain buildings herself. She couldn't go into rooms in classrooms in school. And I look back now at 13, that must have been incredibly tough. And it lasted for about 4 years. We were going through therapy. So really, she lost 4 years of her life as well, of normal life. Mm-hmm. She has some OCD traits now, but again, I'm struggling to know whether they're general anxiety or they're OCD that she's just about keeping from getting to the real bad disorder bit. Or maybe she's learned through her sister. She gets very anxious about OCD themes, really. But I think she just about manages to handle it and manage it before it becomes, life-changing or affects her life. Yeah. But yeah, it was very, very tough on her too, and on relationships. I mean, it took me my husband to the brink, because one of you's got to be good cop, bad cop. So then you can end up falling out, because I'm the mum and I don't want to push it that far. But obviously one of you's got to push it that far, because otherwise this monster's always going to win. So it's very challenging from every angle, really, from a family dynamic point of view, and for your family to understand, because of course some of family we didn't even confide in because you just felt a bit embarrassed.
Right. But I think, the bigger message there is that while especially when you're first in it and you don't fully know what's going on, as a family, everybody is impacted in a very strong way. But good news is that once you understand what's going on, once someone is properly diagnosed and you start getting treatment and you start developing a plan of how to deal with it, you can come out on the other side with a lot less stress, a lot less problems. And, because it's, okay, now we understand what's going on. Now we understand why this is happening. And now we know what to do about it. Before, it was always probably a big mystery, right?
It was, and I sort of kick myself because I'm a Google researcher. I mean, before I go to our GP, I pretty much have diagnosed myself what's wrong. And 9 times out of 10, I'm right. And I look back now and I think, why did I not do since she's come out the other side, I've done massive research on it. I found loads of people on social media I follow, I'm learning from. And I think as a person who's constantly learning and constantly researching, I think, why on earth didn't I research? And I think, is it maybe because I had OCD myself, that maybe that's how it sneaked in? Because I guess I was always going to feed it, being a victim myself. Again, I just about managed the disorder bit, I think. And I think that's why it doesn't impact greatly on my life. I just about keep it in play. But as I say, maybe that's why I took my eye off the ball. I really don't know. But I do look back and I think, why didn't I pick up on the signs? But then I think, well, hindsight's wonderful. And then I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing now had it not happened. So maybe that was my purpose in life.
Yeah. No, you said something else there that's important to me, because so many of my clients, I always ask them, is there anyone in your family who had OCD as well? And most of the time, the answer is yes. Or it will be, well, we always suspected that mom had OCD, but she was never diagnosed, something like that.
Yeah.
And, I'm not aware of any science that definitively proves a genetic link. I know there are studies currently being done looking at genetic link for OCD. But it is interesting how a great majority of the clients that I see anyway tend to have some sort of family connection to OCD.
It's funny enough, every parent I've spoken to and those who comment on social media, I've yet to have a parent who hasn't got signs of OCD. So I think the genetic link is very strong, or it could equally be learned behavior, because I look back now and I used to say to the children, oh, can you just go and check that I've turned that switch off? Can you check I've locked the door? So of course, I suppose you could argue from a young age, I planted a seed in there that when you're feeling anxious, you go and check on things repeatedly. So it's difficult for me. My hunch is that it is through the genes, but then I think, is it the genes, or is it very early behavior we pass on to them?
Yeah, and that's a great question. And that's, as you read the books in the area and you look at the different theories, behavior is definitely, a piece of the puzzle that is looked at a lot. Yeah. It makes sense the way you're describing it. But again, from a from a pure scientific end, we don't have an actual answer. We have theories, and the
Yeah.
theories make sense. But at the end of the day, does it really matter? You know, what really matters is being able to provide help to those who are, you know, struggling with it. So,
Yes.
so do you
And
have?
I've been amazed how many people are struggling with it, because I got to be honest, I thought this was going to be a tiny niche, and I thought, well, that didn't matter, because even if I only helped one person, it was worth it. But the amount of people who are coming forward, and I thought I had no idea how many children as well are suffering from OCD. It's just been staggering. And they're just the ones who are admitting to it, because we know, don't we, a lot of people don't admit to it because they're ashamed to sort of put it out there. And it's the same when I'm on social media. People very often don't comment publicly, but they send me a direct message. And I thought, so even that in itself just explains that people don't admit to everybody else, do they, that they've got it or their children have got it, which is interesting.
Yeah, no, it's I find, you know, the same experience that when I first started, you know, delving into the area, there seems to be a lot more of it than people recognize. And I think there's a lot of people, like you said, that have OCD that don't realize they have OCD. And, you know, one of the interesting things, at least here in the US, I can't speak for other countries, but in the US, I have spoken to therapist after therapist after therapist, to psychiatrists, to psychologists, anyone in the field. And I always ask them, did you learn anything about OCD in school for your degree? And I've yet to have anybody who says yes. Every one of them tells me, no, we've got nothing about it. And I didn't get anything about it in school either. And I had to learn about it because I had a client who, you know, it triggered the thought, and I started reading about it and I started learning about it. And lo and behold, you know, I looked back over the years and I realized I had some other clients who probably had OCD too. And I had no idea because no one ever taught me about it.
No.
So, you know, one of the reasons that I'm doing this podcast and some of the other things I do is to bring the awareness out there, to break the stigma. I do, you know, free trainings for therapists about OCD. We do the YouTube channel. We do a lot of different events and things. I have a support group. Through all this, you'd be surprised. Like I run a free support group and it's open to anyone. The number of people who come from different countries around the world, and they talk about how like their country may not even have any mental health resources or anything. And they're sitting there struggling with OCD. They don't know what to do about it. They don't have anywhere to turn. And somehow or other, through internet research, I guess, they find a support group, and at least they have that. So it is really, you know, interesting how we need to bring this more and more into the light so that people become more aware of it.
Yes, because it's just amazing, as you say, there's so much misinformation still out there, isn't there? And I mean, people mean well, but when they saw I'm a bit OCD, I forgot, trust me, you cannot be a bit OCD. It's not a case where you like your fridge stacked in a certain order. It can be if it's controlling your life, but 9 times out of 10, it's just where you're a bit of a perfectionist. And there's a huge difference, isn't there, between the two? And you've got to live through it really to know the difference.
Yeah, absolutely. So do you have any projects coming up? What do you see in your future now?
In my future, my long-term, I'm going to continue to support parents, but I also want to educate schools, because schools, without realizing it, I think if you were to ask a teacher, would you know if a child's got OCD? They would probably say they think they would, but they wouldn't have a clue, because they wouldn't have known none of them knew my daughter had OCD. But if you know the signs to look out for, they would have known. And then some were singling her out, saying, why have you left your school books here in front of a whole classroom? And, you know, some could be quite not understand. I know they didn't know what was going on, but there was obviously something going on, and it just needed that discreet conversation. So I'm planning doing some workshops to educate school professionals so they know what to look out for. And if there is a child there, how to deal with it and how to help them. Because even like a small incident, particularly if you've got contamination OCD, little things would trigger it, like you go in for a school photograph where you're wearing your blazer. Then they just suddenly announce, no, you take the blazers off by your arms. Well, that couldn't happen at that time. So I would just have her in hysterics leaving school. And in the end, I said, look, if you do have anything like that that's likely to change last minute that I can't prepare for, can you just give me prior warning? and I can just make sure she doesn't attend school that day or that she comes in later. So I think there's lots of little ways schools can support children discreetly without drawing attention to the fact that they have OCD.
Mhm. Wow. Yeah, that's a big challenge, especially for one person. You got to get it.
It is, yeah, and it's knocking doors, isn't it? It's trying to get in there as well.
Yeah. Wow. So if I were to ask, what advice would you say is the most important for a parent who is newly discovering that their child has OCD?
Right, I would tell them to understand OCD, how it operates, so that they don't feed it what I call the 3 R's, which is giving it a reaction when it wants an audience with a meltdown, getting recruited, and giving it reassurance. I gave all 3 in abundance, and that's when things really spiraled out of control. So I would say definitely to get understanding of OCD, understand that it's separate from your child. That was a big one for me, and something I didn't learn really till I come out the other end, when they say you should communicate with it separately, because it made it easier to deal with OCD meltdowns, because it's easy to take it personally. You've got your child screaming at you, and I think, no, I've got to remember it's not her voice, it's OCD's voice that's doing the screaming. So I would definitely say to educate yourself. Obviously, get professional therapy straight away, or get your name down for professional therapy. Follow people on social media, not just me, anyone. There's lots of good people out there on social media who are giving a lot of free advice on how to start managing it so you're not feeding it more in the meantime. As I say, to challenge it. What else would I say? Get support. And as I say, to play detective as well. That was another big one for me, because it sneaked in through the back door then with eating. It took control of eating. So then we were it was like a whack-a-mole game, isn't it? You whack one down and thought, we're getting really somewhere here. And then really it sidetracked me then. Even when you know what you're doing, it can still sidetrack you. And the next thing is controlling eating, telling us she couldn't eat so many calories, she couldn't eat in certain food groups. And that was a really, really tricky one to try and tackle, still is. It's ongoing. We're better than we were. So I would say, yeah, you need to be constantly playing detective as well to look out for the new signs. So educate yourself what those early signs are, know that it can creep in again, and just be aware of it and tackle it straight away. Don't let it sort of escalate like I did.
Right. Wow. Well, that's good advice. So you said that you have a website. I'm assuming you have the information about your books and all the things you've talked about on your website. Is that true?
I do, yes, yes.
What is your website address in case people wanted to go take a look at it?
Right. My website is www.themindmonsters.co.uk. What I would say is, though, it'll say on there I personally sign books purchased on there, but unfortunately I can't do for anyone overseas because the postage would be more than the cost of the books. But my books are still available on Amazon, the Book Depository, and most online retailers. My digital book is available to download on there, so that's available. And there are details of workshops that I run ad hoc, and when I get enough people interested, I just run a workshop as well. Okay. And I've got free resources on that you can download as well, including a Hank activity book for your children and a Trixie one.
Great. And you said you have a Facebook group?
I do. Again, it's called The Mind Monsters.
Okay. All right.
Yes.
And
then I'm all over TikTok, Instagram, LinkedIn.
You're pretty busy.
I'm pretty busy. It's TikTok that's sort of taken off me at the moment. I've got quite a lot of subscribers. One video, I think I've got about 13,000 views to, and I've done hardly any work on there. So people that really seem interested on TikTok about OCD.
Wow. Wow. Yeah. I mean, there's so many places to get the word out. It's hard to know where to go, but there's different people in different
It is, because I thought I was the wrong age group for TikTok, but I've been proved wrong.
Well, yeah. I think it's information that people want to get, and they don't know where to go. And it's more that's out there, the more it breaks the stigma. And I congratulate you for all the work that you're doing. Thank
you, because I had one lady who was quite emotional for me the other day. She actually recorded, I went into my messages on Instagram, and she'd videoed herself, and she had tears, and she would just go like that, praying me, saying thank you. And I thought, I know how you're feeling, because I've been where you are. I've been crying over a glass of wine on a Friday, looking at photographs, wondering when your life's ever going to get back to normal. And she's, I can't thank you enough for what you're sharing. But I thought, that is what I'm doing. I'm doing it to raise awareness, because I don't want anybody to ever go through what we went through, because I just couldn't put into words how awful it was.
Right.
And I'm so grateful to be out the other side, living a normal life, and my daughter to be pursuing the, life of her dreams, that any way I can pay back and help others, I will.
Yeah, no, and it's sorely needed. And I'm sure that all of the people who see your videos and read your books and read your posts and things are getting valuable information from it. And if you weren't doing it, it wouldn't be there for them. So
No.
thank you for doing it.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for having me on your podcast.
Well, I appreciate you were able to take the time and join. We have the big time difference and we had to figure that out, but it worked.
Yes.
And
We got there.
what I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure that I put a link to your website in the messages below the video here. So when people see it, they can go and they can check out the courses. I've read the books myself. I was able to purchase them on Amazon. So
thank you for your support.
Sure.
Oh, thank you.
And any other things out there that you feel are important that we can collectively share to spread the word, I'm certainly available and happy to help you do that.
Thank you.
Maybe we'll have you back on again to check in on you in a bit. But
that'd be good. I'd like that.
Yeah. So this is wonderful. So thank you for taking the time.